Welcome to Nazarene Israel. My name is Norman Willis, and I'm the apostle for the restoration of the original first century faith. And in this short video presentation, we'd like to talk about Ruth and the laws of redemption as are found in the Torah. So one of the things that we need to know is that the book of Ruth is traditionally read for Shavuot, or the Pentecost. And it's a beautiful story about duty, redemption, and covenant relationships as prescribed by Yahweh Elohim in his Torah. So we're not going to cover the whole story because we want to read the details for ourselves. But just to catch us up on the backstory, there's a man by the name of Elimelech, and he's from Bethlehem. He has a wife named Naomi, and there's famine in Israel. So Elimelech decides to move the family to Moab, which is in modern-day Jordan. And that's where Naomi's husband Elimelech dies. So Naomi has her two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and they marry Moabite women, one by the name of Orpah and the other by the name of Ruth. But then both of Naomi's sons die. So the women are left, Naomi and her two daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. And then we come to the story in Ruth chapter 1 and verse 6. And it says, "Then Naomi arose with her daughters-in-law to come back to the land of Israel, that she might return from the country of Moab. For she'd heard in the country of Moab that Yahweh had visited his people by giving them bread." And so in context, what would have happened is that the Aviv barley crop in the spring, just prior to the Passover, would have been seen to be substantial. So they decide to come back to the land of Israel, and Orpah and Ruth decide to go with her. But then in verse 11, Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb that they may be your husbands?" She's saying she's older in years. She doesn't have any sons in her womb. And even if she did, would they wait for them to grow up? And then they'd be beyond childbearing age, most likely. So she asks Orpah and Ruth to turn back for their own good. And Orpah does go back. But in verse 16, Ruth says, "Entreat me not to leave you, or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your Elohim, my Elohim." What she doesn't say here, but what she's effectively saying is, she's saying, I love you. I don't want to be separated from you. I want to be part of the nation of Israel like you, and I want to serve also your Elohim. And this is the point at which Ruth becomes an Israelitess, is she's taken the mark, effectively, of loyalty on her right hand and on her forehead. She's professed loyalty to the Elohim of Israel and to Yahweh's people, Israel. So this is in marked contrast to the Babylonian systems of today, where customs would probably turn Ruth back at the border for not having the appropriate paperwork in her visa, so to speak. So we come on to verse 22. "So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, returned with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And now they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. And there was a relative of Naomi's husband," Ruth chapter 2 and verse 1. "And there was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech." So he's related to Naomi's ex-husband Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. Verse 2, "So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, 'Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him in whose sight I may find favor.'" In other words, let me talk to your family and your people and see who will let me glean grain so that we have something to eat. And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So Ruth comes to Boaz, and Boaz says to Ruth, "You will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by, my young women," because Boaz has heard that Ruth is a faithful person. But Ruth, verse 10, Ruth falls on her face and bows down to the ground and says to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" Because Ruth is a Moabitess, and the people of Moab and the people of Israel are historically in conflict. So verse 11, "Then Boaz answered and said to her, 'It's been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you've left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. Yahweh repay your work, and a full reward be given you by Yahweh Elohim of Israel. Under wings you have come for refuge. And notice that in these ancient times, prior to the exile to Babylon, the name of Yahweh was used in everyday greetings and blessings. This very much unlike the modern Babylonian practice of not speaking the name. So we need to understand the story. Now we need to understand the laws for taking care of good immigrants and strangers, as found in Leviticus chapter 23 and verse 22, where Yahweh tells us that when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field when you reap, nor shall you gather any gleaning from your harvest, the gleaning being the bits and pieces that are left behind. He says, you shall leave them for the poor and for the stranger, basically the immigrant. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. So what Yahweh is saying here is when you have a good immigrant, someone who's joining themselves to me, to Yahweh, and joining themselves to the nation of Israel, make a way, make provision for them, help them out a little bit. And this is what Boaz does, because Boaz has the heart of the Torah. So we come to Ruth chapter 2 and verse 15. So when Ruth rose up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Also, let grain from the bundles fall purposefully for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So Ruth stayed, verse 23, so Ruth stayed close by the young women of Boaz, to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. So now what we need to understand is what's called the laws of Yibum, or in English it's called Levirate marriage. And for the full details of this, I can refer you to the Covenant Relationships collection. But in the laws of Yibum, or Levirate marriage, we read in Deuteronomy chapter 25 and verse 5, where Yahweh says, if brothers, or basically relatives, but if brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family, but her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. Now, in context, we're not dealing with brothers dwelling together, but we're dwelling with relatives. So Boaz would be the uncle, and Ruth's husband, ex-husband, Mahlon, would be the nephew. But in any event, when relatives dwell together. So we continue in verse 6. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. So we have a situation where Elimelech's name and also Mahlon and Chilion's names are going to be blotted out of Israel because they have no sons. Continuing in verse 7. It says, but if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate, to the elders, and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him, because a family name is important, and family is supposed to take care of family in ancient Israel. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's, meaning his relative's house. So again, taking care of your relatives was very important culturally in this time frame. Verse 10, and his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal removed. So we come to Ruth chapter 3 and verse 1 with this understanding. And then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? And what wise Naomi is saying is, shouldn't I seek a husband so that you have some security? She continues in verse 2. Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, Is he not our relative? So she's referring to these laws in Deuteronomy 25. She says, in fact, he's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself and put on basically your best garment and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. Verse 4, then it shall be that when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do. So basically, she's going to uncover his feet. His feet are going to get cold, and he's going to wake up and see her there, and then he will tell her what she should do. So this is what takes place in verse 9. He says, who are you? So she answered, I'm Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. And just this term, this phrase, under your wing, is probably taken from Ezekiel chapter 16 and verse 8, where Yahweh is speaking love to Jerusalem, love and words of comfort. And he says, when I passed by you again and looked upon you, indeed your time was the time of love. So I spread my wing over you and covered your nakedness. Yes, I swore an oath to you and entered into a covenant with you, and you became mine, says Yahweh Elohim. So this term, to take someone under your wing, is essentially to form a covenant with them and to shelter them and to cover their nakedness in their time of love, so to speak. So Ruth chapter 3 and verse 10, then he said, blessed are you of Yahweh, my daughter, for you've shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, and that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. So in the beginning, he showed kindness to Naomi by leaving her father and her mother and the land of her birth, and coming with Naomi to become back to the land of Israel. And now she's showing even more kindness. Instead of seeking out young men her age, she's seeking to raise up an heir to her deceased husband's name. So he continues in verse 11, and now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. He says, now it's true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Verse 13, stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you, as Yahweh lives. Lie down until morning. So now what we need to understand is that in addition to the laws in the Torah for redeeming a widow, there are also laws in the Torah for redeeming a sold piece of ground. When we come to Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 23, we're told that the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. So in the Torah, the land, when land is sold, what it really was in today's terminology, it will be leased for a period of up to 49 or 50 years, and then in the 50th year it would go back to its original owner. So Yahweh continues in verse 24. He says, and in all the land of your possession you shall grant a right of redemption of the land. So in other words, if you leased your land out for up to 49 years and then you came into enough money that you wanted to redeem the lease, you would be able to do that. And not only would you be able to do that, but a relative of yours would also be able to do that, as we read in Leviticus 25 and verse 25, where it tells us, if one of your brethren becomes poor and has sold some of his possession, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it, then he may redeem what his brother has sold. And so this is the case with Boaz redeeming the parcel. So with this knowledge, we come to Ruth chapter 4 and verse 1. It says, now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, come aside, friend, sit down here. So he came aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they also sat down. Then he said to the close relative, Naomi, who's come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother, or basically our relative, Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know. For there's no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. He's saying, I want the land, but you're in the first position. And he said, I will redeem it. And is sort of one of those situations where he says, aha, but there's a catch. So continuing in verse 5. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. Because after Naomi, Ruth's ex-husband Mahlon would have had a certain right of inheritance. So verse 6. And the close relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. He's saying, I'm already married and it's going to mess up my own inheritance situation too much. So he says, you redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So what he's effectively saying here is, you've already expressed an interest in both the piece of ground and in Ruth the Moabitess. I'm married, so I'm going to pass on my right of redemption and let you go ahead. Verse 7, he says, now this was the manner in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging, to confirm anything. One man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was a confirmation in Israel. Therefore the close relative said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. So he took off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and to all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses this day. Verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. Yahweh gave her conception, and she bore a son. Also the neighbor women gave him a name, verse 17, saying, there's a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Oved, which means serving, which is a picture of what Ruth has been doing. And he is the father of Yeshai, the father of David. So this shows us the connection why the book of Ruth is read at Shavuot, because it's the Jewish tradition is the Torah was given at Shavuot as a wedding contract or a ketubah between Yahweh and his people Israel. And this story also shows us how Ruth is grafted into the nation of Israel by her faith. And it also shows us that Boaz is a prophetic shadow picture of Yeshua, who would become our kinsman redeemer. If you want to know more details, I encourage you to get a copy of the Torah calendar. You can read it for free on the pages of NazareneIsrael.org. You can also download a PDF copy in English, Spanish, or German, or you can purchase a paperback copy at our cost from Amazon.com. So with this knowledge, now you can understand the culture that goes into the book of Ruth. Shalom.